So today I thought I would talk about the 1973 movie Godzilla versus Megalon, and the reason I'm going to talk about that is because my figure of Gigan should be here any day, and this is the other show of film featuring Gigan. This is the follow-up to Godzilla versus Gigan, and I talked about that one and said that I was not a big fan of Godzilla versus Gigan, mostly because I thought it got childish and silly, and that is kind of where Godzilla was at this point. They were trying to appeal to children. So in Godzilla versus, this is by the way my Criterion collection, which has the complete Showa era from 1954 to 1975. So in this film, there's a civilization called the Cetopia, which is kind of a Atlantis type civilization, highly advanced, that has survived in secret, and their world is being threatened because of humans' atomic testing. And for whatever reason, they decide they want to steal this robot from these two guys that create a robot called Jet Jaguar, which is a humanoid robot that's kind of disturbing looking. Apparently, the design was loosely based on an award-winning entry by a child in Japan. And so I'll talk about Jet Jaguar in a little bit. But basically what they do is they release Megalon, this is Megalon. And Megalon is kind of an insectoid type kaiju with what looked like metallic spear-like hands, and he can spit these big red globes or sphere, or kind of like football type things that will explode. Not a kaiju with a lot of love. I don't believe he's ever appeared in any other movie, even Final Wars, which had almost everything. And I don't know if it's necessarily the design. The design is not great, but it may be the film that it's attached to, which is not a great film in the Godzilla series. So he's interesting in the way he kind of bounces around, which looks silly, particularly since he's supposed to be a gigantic kaiju. But I actually kind of found it, I don't know, I kind of liked that part. That could have been extremely cringe-worthy, but I kind of liked that in a film where I didn't like much that was going on. So Jet Jaguar decides to go out and meet Megalon, or the aliens are trying to capture, and they do capture Jet Jaguar. And Jet Jaguar is leading Megalon around to destroy cities, and they lead him to Tokyo. And the two guys manage to, I'm leaving a lot out of the story, but they manage to regain control of Jet Jaguar, and then they send him to get Godzilla. And Godzilla at this point is just a straight up hero. He's the hero of the story. So they've definitely changed it from what he originally was and what he would become later on. This is kind of the final days of him being a hero. And I would say that even the Showa films, they did not have a complete decline. I would say that films like later films, there were a few more, like Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla and Terror of Mechagodzilla were considerably better. In fact, Terror of Mechagodzilla might be my favorite. One of my favorite of the Showa films. Actually, the original was my favorite. So I didn't really like the fighting in Godzilla versus Gigan, and it's even worse here. So the aliens, Jet Jaguar seems to be struggling against Megalons, but once Godzilla comes into the picture, or he's on his way, the aliens say, okay, he's not going to be able to fight both of them. So they ring up the aliens from the M Nebula, something of the Space Nebula, and they say, hey, can we borrow Gigan? So Gigan comes along, and Gigan, unfortunately, he was, as much as I didn't really like the fighting in the Godzilla versus Gigan, there were some brutal parts in there, and particularly when he was using his blade on his chest buzzsaw on Godzilla and caused him to bleed. This fighting is a lot tamer and stupider, and I really didn't think it was very good. They just don't fight like kaiju. They fight like people in suits. And that's not a good thing. At one point, Godzilla has Gigan. I can't remember if it's Gigan or Megalon, but he's just bouncing on his chest with his butt, and it's not good. There is one part where Gigan does fly and cuts Godzilla with his buzzsaw. Unfortunately, that part is taken from the previous film. So they used footage from the previous film, which is pretty weak. So finally, Jet Jaguar and Godzilla tag team, and they beat Gigan. And the one thing I will say about Gigan and Megalon, and the one thing I will say about Gigan, he never fights on his own. He's always tag teaming, twice with King Ghidorah or Kaiser Ghidorah, and once with Megalon. So he never does a one-on-one fight. But then again, Godzilla actually in Final Wars was by himself. So then I believe that, I don't know if there were plans to do more with Jet Jaguar. He seems really out of place. I'll show what Jet Jaguar to anyone who doesn't know what Jet Jaguar looks like. This is Jet Jaguar. He has a disturbing face. That leering grin is not pleasant. And if Bandai made a Jet Jaguar figure, I probably wouldn't get it, because I think it is not a good figure, not a good character. It's very silly, and he reminds me of King Caesar in that there's a lot of buildup, and then it's like, oh, okay. And but King Caesar at least looks like he belongs in the Godzilla universe. This does not, I don't think. And he's humanoid size, and at one point he grows up to kaiju size, and the two the designers or whatever, engineers who created him, they're talking about the fact that he was never designed to do that, but he just, through sheer force of will, made himself kaiju size, and that's really kind of stupid. and apparently for that time being became sentient, just because he felt he needed to. And he's kind of at the, well, he and Godzilla shake hands after they win. It's just not, it's not a good film, not in my opinion. Maybe some people love it, but I don't think it's highly well regarded. I just remember that there's a scene in there where Megalon bursts through a dam, and I was just like, wow, that really looked good. And apparently they invested a lot of time and effort in that one scene, and it looked good. And mostly the film did not look good. The Godzilla remains, his costumes are very floppy and just fighting in non-kaiju type ways. And so that's the other film with Gigan. He would come back years later in Final Wars, but I believe those are the only 3 films that he appears in. Although if featured in 3 films, that's better than most. And Gigan is generally regarded as one of the strongest of Godzilla's foes, although I don't know. He's always got an assist from another, and I kind of felt like he was like the secondary one. Every time he appears with King Ghidorah, it always feels like he's the second banana in there. Even though he did most of the fighting in Godzilla versus Gigan, King Ghidorah kind of held back, and used his long distance attacks. But I still, it feels like he's the henchman, and King Ghidorah is the main one. So anyway, that's Godzilla versus Megalon. Again, not a film I particularly recommend, but I watch them all, so I don't plan on watching it anytime soon again.